What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Hope everyone's had a good sports week thus far. A lot of NFL to still kind of carry over the conversation with the Super Bowl. Of course, some NBA plays. Our good friend Jovan Alfred at Jovan10, content producer, Sporting News, Total Sports Live as well. Give him a follow on Twitter. He's got the pooch with him today. He still has the nice fresh cut. It's still sitting there. How did you do with your bets on Super Sunday, my friend?
I think the ones that we gave out did pretty all right. I think the biggest one that we hit probably that we gave out for Eagles side was AJ Brown anytime touchdown. We did
that was
nail
the other
on
one.
that
Yep.
one. And I think Pacheco did good. I didn't go back and check, but I know his rushing yards was over 46.5. So I think he got that one. I didn't go back and look at the box score. I think he did. So overall, I think we gave out some pretty good plays to end the week for everybody.
Totally agree. And it probably lessened the blow a little bit from a tough loss by the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, listen, let's start with the play that everyone's talking about, where if you really slow it down, Bradbury not only tugged and held Juju, but he did it twice. There's a great shot, and by definition, it's a penalty. Do we want to see that flag thrown in that spot, in that situation, on that stage? I would argue with those that say you can't do it. Well, where is there a written rule? Because I can tell you this. If that flag is thrown on Kansas City and it keeps the Philadelphia Eagles drive alive and they kick a game-winning field goal to win the Super Bowl, and Chiefs fans are bitching, whining, and complaining for the past 3 days, you know what? Eagles fans are going to sit there and say, well, I mean, hey, by definition, it was a flag. It just so happened that it went against Philadelphia. So you see that the hanky getting pulled out and thrown late in that game. What do you think?
I'm disappointed. Just because, and I explained this to, friends that are like not Eagles fans right there, Ravens fans, whatever, etc. Like for me personally, and I'm rarely the one to like criticize referees and like umpires and stuff, but I feel like in that spot, regardless of who the team is, you just hate to see that because it essentially like ends the game. So us as a football fan, right? We kind of get that moment of, oh man, we don't get to see what like this quarterback does, right? Especially with the way Hurts played outside of the fumble. You're like, man, like we don't get a chance to see what he could have did in like one last drop. And I think a lot of people, from an Eagles fan perspective, I think they would have been cool with the Eagles had lost, right? It would have just been offense, just couldn't get it done, right? They get stopped on fourth. Spagnuolo brings the blitz. Can't get it done incomplete. I think in that moment, and I've also found this shocking. Like you even saw some like current and former NFL players like saying like you can't pull the flag in that moment right there. I think people, like you said, I think like him, like by the textbook rule, he did do it, and you give Bradbury, props for manning up to it, because there's a lot of players that just wouldn't do it, wouldn't say anything at all, or make up stuff, go on a roll like how the Niners did about situations happened in their game. No, he took it, and I give him props for doing that. I think as a fan, you don't like to see the flag called there, especially when holding what's happening in throughout that game, and then you're like, oh man, it happens right there. You're disappointed, and that effectively ends the game right there.
But can I counter that and say that the Eagles had this game? This is a 24-14 game, right? Even when Hurts had the fumble and it was returned. First of all, 3rd and 1. I think there was a false start or holding penalty. No, false start on Sayamalu. Yep. 3rd and 6. You put Hurts in shotgun, and that's what happens, right? So you're talking about the swinging points. They go into the locker room, and by the way, they came back and they scored the ensuing drive, did the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's a 24-14 game. They tackle Mahomes on the scramble. He goes hobbling off. You go in the locker room. Instead of 15 minutes, you get to 25 to 30 minutes. He can recoup. They can gather themselves, and Andy Reid can make adjustments. And in the second half, this is Kansas City's drive chart. Touchdown, 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 field goal. So they outscored them. What was it? 24 points, I should say, even when the Eagles had the lead going into the locker room. So I hear everything you're saying, and I can respect it. What I get I've kind of got annoyed a little bit this week when talking about this game is that they had ample opportunities. I think a lot of people felt right before they went into the locker room and they kicked out field goal 24-14, they had a grasp of this game. And then what
Mhm.
happens, right? That 14-14, 21-14, 24-14, 10-point cushion. In the second half, Kansas City played a flawless game, 0 penalties, 0 turnovers. They allowed 0 sacks. They
Mhm.
converted on a couple fourth downs. Mahomes, 4 drives, 13-14 in the second half, 24 points. So everyone's sitting there saying, well, Andy Reid made these adjustments and they were just better than Jonathan Gannon. He did make but they really didn't, because they got beat twice on the same
Mhm.
play, essentially. That was on different sides of the field, right? The way they lined up. And
Right.
it's just, to me, that kind of reeks to, I don't want to say unprepared, but again, you play that, as opposed to man, you play that differently, and you're not getting those 2 scores, right?
Right. No,
So,
correct. And
yeah,
I think for me, like in the chart of like things that I'm like angry at, like the
yeah,
refs is like on the bottom tier with like the field conditions. 'Cause I think the field conditions were trash for both teams, honestly. And I feel like in that big of a stage, you shouldn't be rolling out new field,
that's a fair point. They had
in
a
that
long time to
situation for
fix
that.
that.
Yeah. So I don't like that. But overall, the buck stops and starts with, Jonathan Gannon, right? And I was never the biggest Gannon fan because I always knew there was holes in his defense. There was flaws in his defense, rather that be, playing soft coverage, rather that be not blitzing, right? You're bringing 4 and you're not getting home. Granted, Chiefs offensive line did their job. Granted,
Yep.
the ground wasn't good enough to get push off, but you don't make adjustments to bring in 5, bring in 6 sometimes just to give it a little bit mix up. And that's my biggest thing with Jonathan Gannon. And we saw it last year when the Eagles played against, the Chargers. He was playing soft
Soft
and
coverage.
soft coverage, and Herbert was able to pick him apart. And I think, and I said this after the game to people, I was just like, if anything, the defense let Jalen Hurts and offense down, because
Agreed.
anytime you score that many points, and the offense did every and anything that you could to try to hold that down. I think if that game, that Super Bowl, is a huge indictment on Jonathan Gannon, and the fact that we did not hear him speak anything afterwards, I think it's more of an indictment. It's just like, all right, I'm gonna go take this job in Arizona, go to this interview. All right. And it's like, all right, that's cool. And honestly, I think there's a lot of Eagles fans that are happy with that. Like, all right, peace. It's
Yeah,
good to
yeah,
know
I'm
you.
hearing a lot of different talking heads say, they're going to miss Jonathan Gannon. And I'll say this.
Please. No.
No, I know. Listen, and the reason I bring it up is because every week with Brandon in 27 and Q, he always says, look, coordinators, they call in the plays. You got to execute. Now, you want to
Yes.
say it's
Yes.
what he's calling in. Sue Davis, Hassan Reddick, Fletcher. Where were those guys, right? Sweat. Where
Mhm.
Patrick Mahomes was touched. He was pressured 49 times in his first 2 Super Bowls. 19, I believe, 19 to 23 against Tampa Bay. He was only pressured 11 times against Philadelphia Eagles. Now, is that a
And
product of maybe
and
we
that's an indictment on Jonathan Gannon, right? Because how
or
many times we've talked on this show about he doesn't blitz, right? He only hangs with 4, and it's like, dude, in the modern NFL, you
can't do
can't do
that?
that. You can't do that.
But
The quarterbacks are too good.
did we overvalue the defense though? I mean, because you and I went on the record and said the defensive line was either going to win or lose this game, right? Wreck the game. I
Mhm.
said on the record, I think this is Tampa Bay, Kansas City all over again. But the fact that they couldn't even touch him, Patrick Mahomes, by all accounts, had a clean jersey at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Is that on? We overvalued, right? We were talking about all these sacks and hey, it's the 72 Dolphins and 85 Bears and 2000 Ravens. But where were they? Like on the biggest stage, even when they beat the Patriots a couple years ago, they gave a 35 points in that Super Bowl. But at the very end of the game, Brandon Graham had the strip sack.
Yeah.
You make
Yeah.
the play. We didn't see that the other night against Kansas City.
No, you didn't. And part of it goes to those guys too, right? They didn't get the job done. It wasn't good. It wasn't high quality level football that we've seen from that Eagles defense, specifically that defensive line, from the entire season. Like you said, the edge rushers were getting there, but they just couldn't turn that corner to get there. I mean, the middle of the defense, they weren't
Yep.
existent. I thought the linebackers honestly did the best that they could, right? The fact that we weren't hearing the linebacker's name called a lot, I thought that was a solid job. Darius Slay didn't look good, on miscommunication, and he hasn't been good for a while now this season. Haven't talked about. I think with him not being good, I think that put a lot of onus on CJ Gardner-Johnson to make plays, and
Yeah,
he made some plays, laid
he
some
did.
hits when he needed it to boot. But it starts with that defense, and it starts with a defensive coordinator. And I think even we got on Jim Schwartz for playing his sixth defense. At least Jim Schwartz, brought some pressure a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing, right? When your pass rush isn't working, how do you adjust? You adjust by bringing one more. You bring TJ
Yep.
Edwards through the A gap, because you don't, and in fact, if you don't like TJ Edwards covering, and a lot of us don't, you send him through the A gap, put pressure on him, change the view a little bit, bring Kazir White on a blitz. Like, it's just those little things, and it just reared the ugly head for Eagles defense because like I said, they let the offense down, right? You let Jalen Hurts and the offense down in the biggest moment, in that game constantly. Every time they went down, they got to score, even to tie the game up, where things like would look like things are about to go off the rails completely after they go in and score. Hurts and offense goes down and puts the team on their back and say, we're going to try to do this one more time, and they don't do it. So if anything, I'm looking at the defense and Jonathan Gannon sideways.
They were too soft. They let Kelsey go off, as we call it. They got beat on two primarily the same plays at 28-27. I thought, you had the big return from Tony, right?
Yeah, horrible punt. I don't know what happened there. And Sipas has been a problem this entire season.
Right.
As well.
So you can special teams, right? Special teams had their hand in the game, but also the last drive, I think when Johnson kind of popped Pacheco, the next play on a 3rd and 5, they hit Kelsey for 7, right? I'm looking at the drive chart.
And that's the backbreaker there. Like, in that spot, and if I know that, and honestly, obviously it's different now, right? Since we already see the game happening, but at 3rd and 5, right? When the game's on the line, you got to send it, because maybe they're not expecting it. Maybe they're like, all right, they're going to sit back and we're just going to hit them over the top. No, this is where you send somebody. Like, you don't matter who it is, if it's Maddox or is it Edwards, you're sending them, because you need to get this stopped somehow, some way. But Gannon didn't do it.
No, and it shows how well Mahomes plays under pressure in the poison. To your comment and point on Jalen Hurts, I mean, people are going to, I hate to draw the parallels, but I feel as though if it's another quarterback makes that fumble, we're probably going to rip them. I'm just being honest. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. If that's a Prescott or Daniel Jones and he still put up those numbers, we're crushing those guys. I think Hurts is getting a pass because he was that MVP caliber type of quarterback this year. I thought he played exceptionally well. I thought he made the plays when he had to make the plays. I mean, that one touchdown, AJ Brown, I don't know what the hell the safeties were doing, but a couple of his throws, they were there. And listen,
for a guy with a shoulder injury, right, that we were worried, coming into the game, like, what would that shoulder be?
Except the last throw.
Yeah.
Which, again, you feel bad for the kid, but he did everything he had to do. Now, you mentioned they not only lose to DC, but they also lose the offensive coordinator. So how much of an impact, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because again, we go right up the turnpike and we see it with the Giants and Daniel Jones. He's played under now 4 offensive coordinators. So now you bring in another guy, you think they'll tailor it to Jalen's strengths, or do you think they're going to try to reinvent the wheel here?
I think they're going to keep it in-house. I think Brian Johnson, the quarterback's coach, will likely move up to the offensive coordinator role, just because he's been getting a lot of, interest, league-wide reportedly to, get the offensive coordinator job. And I think if you're the Eagles, to continue to keep that cohesion, that consistency going between, head coach and quarterback, and OC and quarterback, you got to elevate him. I think he will, right? Because he's played an instrumental part in, getting Hurts to where he needs to be. And it will help the offense, right? With that fluidity, not bringing in someone else from the outside who can't really like pinpoint what they were doing well and things like that. So I think Brian Johnson likely moves up into the OC role as from the quarterback spot.
By the way, Pacheco 15 for 76. We easily hit that one. Yeah, and the touchdown. He's a good player. What happened to Miles Sanders on Sunday? So 7 carries for 16 yards. Gainwell, 7 carries for 21. Boston Scott, 3 for 9. If you take away the 70 from Hurts, they didn't even rush for 45 yards. And earlier in the game, it seemed as though he wasn't on the field. He went back to the locker room, came back. What I don't recall if it was asked why they did not try to run the ball more and why Sanders was not a part of that offense.
I think early on and I thought his first carry where he just like missed the hole and
Yep.
he went sideways, and I thought
Sideways.
like, like they're not going to tolerate this in this moment.
Fair
And I
point.
think I think as we saw, and I think also what helped them too, not playing Sanders as bad as it is, they got more out of their running backs with Scott and Gamewell from a receiving standpoint, which Sanders isn't the better receiver. So I think we saw Gamewell more involved. Like he didn't do big numbers on the
Right.
ground, got over the rushing total for his prop, but he didn't do a lot of damage on the ground, but he did some damage in the passing game. Right. And I think that was a telling sign of that. They probably comfortable moving away from him heading into the offseason and going with a guy like Gamewell and drafting, honestly, because the Eagles aren't a team that spends money at the running back spot.
No, they don't. Not a lot of teams do when you think about it. Did they choke in the second half, or was the defense just a flat out no show?
I think it was the defense was a no-show, right? Because the offense still did what they had to do,
Mhm.
right? To keep it wasn't in like they brought up on the broadcast about, they're maintaining time of possession, but it wasn't maintaining time of possession to try to like, all right, let's get this game over with. It was maintaining time of possession, like we're still getting our plays, we're still,
Yep.
hitting our spots, third and short, fourth and short. And I give them credit. They went on a lot of fourth downs where I thought, I don't think you should be doing it against them, but they, did it. So I think it was more so the defense, because you just look at the defense just gets one stop. Let's just get one stop to force one punt, right? It changes the complexity of the ball game,
Yeah.
because that offense, and credit that offense, they went toe to toe with Steve Spagnuolo's defense and what he does.
And we talked about that scenario, right? 4th and 3, 4th and 5. And funny too, because Andy Reid defers, and early on in the game, he decides to kick the field goal. Well, line up for a field goal attempt that they missed. But I think he did that because he wanted to try to get one extra possession here and there. And I know people were talking about the clock management late by Sirianni. What's funny is everything that people used to hate about Andy Reid for 15 plus years, clock management and lack of balance with the offense.
Oh yeah, he figured it out, and that's always what I tell people,
Yep.
right? Like him leaving Philadelphia, it made him change as a head coach and
Yeah.
understand like
Yeah.
these are
Yeah.
things that I have to improve at to
And
get
he does it against
better.
the
And
Eagles.
so, and that's, you give credit to him, right? He learned what didn't help him in the past now helps him in the future with the adjustments and the time management and time clock. So gotta
They've got
give him credit.
again, Jovan Alford joining us on a Wednesday edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. They've got 20 players, expired contracts, set to be free agents. Give me a yay or nay if you think they're going to come back. Miles Sanders,
No.
Bradbury,
No.
why do you say that?
Because I think he wants to get paid top corner dollars. And I think there is, as we see right in the NFL, there's a need for a number one corner. And I think some team is going to give him top dollar.
TJ Edwards, linebacker.
Yes.
Fletcher Cox.
No.
Yeah, you have to treat him like it's a business decision. Don't be emotional. Gardner Johnson.
Yes.
Marcus Epps.
No.
Hargrave.
Yes.
Linval Joseph.
Nope.
No. Robert Quinn.
No.
No. Boston Scott.
Yes.
And Minshew.
Nope.
Interesting. I get when you get to the Super Bowl and or if you win it, coordinators jump, players jump. What more is there to do? Let me get paid. Let me go to Florida, no tax. Let me just play a couple more years, right? Unless you're Hugh Douglas, I think he made 12 million in one sack for Jacksonville, but that's besides the point. I don't want to overstate this, and this is not rubbing salt in the wound, but I'll tell you, man, when you have a Super Bowl one, and they had control of that game, and you lose it, and you lose it in the fashion in which they lost, sometimes that is a big time trickle effect going into the offseason. Like, it's great to remember the ones you win, but sometimes when you lose the nasty ones like that in that way, shape, or form, they're tough to overcome. They really are. And I'm wondering too, with these impending free agents, we got the draft right around the corner, how they're going to kind of approach it from, a mental standpoint. I mean, because ultimately Jalen Hurts is going to want to get paid, right? So,
Mhm.
I mean, that's a conversation for another day, but I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, Cincinnati was an exception to the rule, right? Cincinnati loses his Super Bowl, but then they get all the way back into the AFC Championship and had an opportunity, if it wasn't for a couple of goofy plays here and there, and then of course the
Right.
roughing the passer penalty, to win that game and get back to the Super Bowl. I think it's going to be tough next year in the NFC. I really do. I don't think the teams that we saw this year that maybe overachieved or were bad, I don't think they're going to be um, as bad as they were. Like, I think the Giants are going to spend money and make some moves. I think
Mhm.
Dallas is going to spend. I think Washington's going to make a hard push for either Carr or Lamar Jackson. That's just me. Um, so I guess you can't overstate the fact that once you get there, there's no guarantee that you're going to get back.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. And I've already prepared myself, told myself that they're not going to get back into this spot next year just because just history, right? And trends say it's hard, like you said, to get back, right? Cincinnati was the exception, to the rule of
Yeah.
getting there back to back, and even, KC to get back to it and things like that. Yeah, I don't think the Eagles get back to this spot, not because they're going to be bad or anything, but the talent's going to get better, right? And money's going to be spent in the division, in the conference. Yeah, it's just going to be one of those things where it's going to be somebody else new, and that's fine, right? If you're the Eagles, it's okay if you don't get back to this point or even get to the NFC title game next year, just because you exceeded expectations earlier than
Oh
anybody
yeah.
expected, right? That window was supposed to be kind of like opening like next year, not this year.
Yeah.
So I think next year, I think next season, they're going to have a tougher schedule. There's going to be a lot of interesting rematches on the schedule next year. If I've already looked, San Fran's going to be an interesting one. KC again
Two
will
against the
definitely,
Giants, man.
yeah, the
And
Giants
they've
is
owned
going
the
to be a good
Giants.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Giants are going to be another good one. It's going to be fun. I think it's going to be very fun to see how the offseason plays out, because I think that will tell us everything, because we kind of know how the AFC is kind of going to go,
Yeah.
right? Nobody at this point, like, it's going to be tough to dethrone, the Chiefs, unless they don't have like Kelsey, right? If he's like hurt for like a amount of time, but he hasn't. And Mahomes has shown us that he can do it with a
Right.
ragtag bunch of wide receivers named Juju Smith-Schuster and Kadarius Toney. So AFC is set. It's just the NFC. I think that's where the competition is going to be at. I think it's going to be teams jockeying for, those spots, right? Maybe
And
Detroit steps up and beats that team in the North, right? After Minnesota have kind of
yeah,
not lived up to expectations, and Rodgers possibly going nowhere. Detroit could be that team because they look like they have everything lined up for them
yeah, it's a good
if they
team.
continue to add to what they already have.
Well coached. They just need to play a little defense here and there, but they can put
Yeah.
up a lot of points. I don't know where Rodgers is going to go. I actually was writing about it today. I think teams are hearing what he says, and I'm starting to see some cracks here, right? Because I get being a free thinker, and listen, you want to go in the woods,
Right.
you want to hide out and do whatever you need to do to get your mind right. Right, you're free to do that. But if you're going to be very open about your personal life and then questioned on it, don't take it out on NFL insiders, right? Don't
Right. Because you
because
willingly
you're
put it
putting it
out there.
out there. We can opine about it. And I'm
Hmm.
starting to see, the more he chirps and talks, I'm telling you, is it really worth the trouble? And I look at the Jets, they went down this road with Favre years ago. I'm looking at, say, like the Raiders. Okay, I get it. You're tight with Adams, but no wide receiver wants to hear the quarterback running his mouth, especially when you're losing. You stick him in the New York market and they drop 3 out of 4. How's he going to handle the media? I'm starting to believe he's going to go in he's going to bury the head in the hole and do his thing. And this is just me. I get the gut feeling he's going to retire. It's my gut.
I
And
could
I
see it.
also
I
don't,
could really see it.
yeah, I don't believe these 20 teams knocking down his door. I
No,
don't. Are you going to
no.
sacrifice for one quick fix one season? I mean, hell, the Rams did it, but they
But look
also,
where they at now. They're in trouble. They're in trouble.
yeah,
I don't see it happening for Rodgers just because how many times he got to the NFC title game or a division round as the number one seed and couldn't get it done, right?
you don't
The
have to tell me. I
last time he
know.
been in the Super Bowl was what 2010, 2011. We're talking 10 plus years
And
now.
they were
Like,
15-1 the next year and lost to the Giants in a divisional round.
yeah, so I mean, does he really make a difference if he goes somewhere, right? If he goes to Las Vegas, does he really make them a factor? I don't think so, right? Because you still have the Chiefs, right? You still got the Chargers if they ever figure it out, which I don't I don't know if they will. And now you got Sean Payton in Denver, right? If he
Yep.
goes to the AFC East, does he make a difference? I don't know because you still have Josh Allen. And if Allen cuts down on the red zone turnovers, they could do something. And, with Tua, depending on how that situation shakes out, Miami is going to be a threat, to watch, with Mike McDaniel entering his second year. So it's tough. I mean, we thought he was going to retire in the last year. So, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising because what else does he have really to play for? Because it doesn't seem like he's really like
No,
interested in
he's got
playing.
he's got time, resources, and money. He's just bored right now, right? So let him go and have a couple of
Going to
shrooms and
the
think
going to
about it.
the going to the wilderness.
Going to the wilderness, right? All right. NBA, nice little night on the hardwood. I've got three.
Mhm.
What do you have tonight? Well, you got a couple games. We might have the same ones.
For me, it's a couple of props for this week for tonight's games actually. For one of the plays I like Malachi Brownham over 13.5 points for the for San Antonio Spurs. I know that is not a game that people are probably going to be watching. Spurs Hornets is not league pass
You don't
watch,
know.
but I think this is a good spot for him. He's played really well since he's gotten to the starting lineup, hitting double figures most of the times. There's no Trey Jones. I think he's out. They're going to need a second scorer. He's not shy putting the ball up there. So I like Malik Branham over 13.5 points. I also like Jalen Williams over 4.5 rebounds in the OKC Rockets game. This number has been religiously at plus money for like most of the season, but now the books are starting to get caught up to it now. And now it's like minus 106, minus 110, minus 115, which is still good because he's still like hitting this number like constantly in that offense. So I like that one. And also like Jonas Valanciunas to go for a double-double tonight against the Lakers. Last time he played the Lakers, I think he had 18 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists last week, earlier this month against the Lakers. And he's gotten a double-double in 3 out of his last 5 games this month. So those are the 3 players that I like for tonight's sleep.
All right. So you hit on the Spurs. I'm looking at that game right now. Money line plus, I think it's 210 right now. Spurs 14-44, Hornets 16-44, 16-43. Total is 259.5. So we know the Spurs have lost 13 straight, right? So I went through this. If you look at their last 6 for the Hornets, the margin of victory is 6. This is like 6.5, 7 right now. So you're catching a couple buckets. Hornets are 1-6 ATS to pass 7. Spurs are 3-13 ATS to pass 16. Couple things that this is why I like this game, because if you think about this, right, when we've had these long losing streaks in the NBA and some of these teams are dogs by 6, 7, 8, it always seems there's that one spot to kind of end these losing streaks. They not only cover, but they win outright. I don't trust Hornets. I don't trust their depth. And as I mentioned, 6.5. So you're catching 3+ buckets. I also like the under. It's hit 6 out of 8 in the past 8. So I'm very light on the Spurs money line tonight. 6.5 to 7.
I'm gonna tell you on that. I'm gonna tell you on the Spurs money line.
All right. That's what we like to hear. We got a little BYP going. All right. Knicks and Atlanta. I haven't checked. I don't know if you have it in front of you. Brunson player props. I mean, he's coming off 40. They're coming off 124 as a team against the Nets. They won 2 in a row. They've covered 4 of 5. The total, I think, I'll double check. It's 233.5. Hawks have dropped 3 of 5. They're not a good team ATS against the spread. They gave up 144 against Charlotte. So I like the Knicks laying a number in this one, and I like the total. I like to go over.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, Atlanta's been very up and down, up and down this season. You don't know which team you're going to
Right.
get and which Trae Young you're going to get.
Exactly. And then lastly, and we don't know yet with Embiid, but the Cavs and the Sixers have won 3 straight. Obviously, they're coming off the win against the Rockets, 103, 104. Harden with 29. I think Maxey had like 26, 27 off the bench. So even the only play I like in this is if I think the Cavs are a strong play here due to the health of Embiid,
Mhm.
right? So if you think it's going to be a 1 or 2 possession game, I would take Cleveland. And I know what people are going to say, well, no Embiid, scoring wise, I look at it the opposite way. Rim protector, defense, I think there's going to be more points in this game, right? I think even if Embiid's not playing, Cleveland's going to have some opportunities to take the ball to the rim. So I'm actually going to play 216.5. I'm going to play the over tonight.
I can see it. I can see it just because there is no Embiid. Sixers are going to probably try to get out and run a little bit more with, Montrezl Harrell, Jalen McDaniels, try to
Yeah.
get those guys out and open in space. And people don't know that Cavs team, while they're good defense, they are very good on offense. I
They are.
mean,
They got some
you got
players.
Mitchell can put up buckets, Garland can put up buckets, Mobley is almost, he can score 20. Allen can give you 20, Karis LeVert can give you about 15. So yeah, that I could see it happening, especially with these two teams.
How about Embiid in February? 23, 37, 13, 35, 11, 29, 7, 31, and 14. He's averaging 30.7.
It's amazing. It's
And yet,
amazing.
who are we talking about? Who are the 2 or 3 guys we're talking about in MVP right now?
Jokic, really. It's a lot of Jokic. And I mean, I get it. I understand, right? I get it because he puts up a triple double every night, which I mean, it was cool at first, but it almost like you kind of get like the Westbrook fatigue when he was doing it. It was just like, all right, got another
Here
triple
we go
double.
again.
And yeah, here we go again. And I know that the Nuggets have been the best team in the West. And he honestly, with the Nuggets being like having the best record in the West or being top 3, it might land him as 3rd MVP, but it'd be kind of shocking because it'd be like, well, what does another center have to do to kind of compete in that level, especially if Embiid somehow ends up, top 1, 2 in the league in scoring, this season. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, interesting to see how it plays out. Of course, he is Jovan Alfred at Jovan 10, content producer, Sporting News, and of course, Total Sports Live. Give him a follow on Twitter. He give you the player props. He's typically good with those. We gave you a ridiculous amount of player props for the Super Bowl. Hopefully, you guys put a little coin and back your play on that one. So I told you I'll go with the over the Cavs tonight. I'll go with the Spurs money line, and then I'm going to take the Knicks and the over. And I'll see about Brunson how I feel on that one. So what do you got cooking this week?
This week, not much. It's kind of quiet, with now football season, kind of like, well, NFL season is kind of with no more NFL seasons.
USFL,
but we got the USFL in the spring and we got the XFL this weekend. So definitely looking forward to, checking out those games, laying down some bets on that, even though a lot of people won't, but, take a stab at it. And a lot of the lines are short.
yes,
right now because we don't know what to expect. So should be fun action, checking out the XFL this weekend.
Nice. All right, brother. Always appreciate it a couple times. Thanks for jumping on a Wednesday edition of BYP. Enjoy the rest of the week and put a little coin in the pocket, will you?
Yep, sure will.